That is loud. Oh. We should get you a microphone. You are a committee member. Test. That's what matters. Thank you, Betsy. You are so welcome. Okay.
All right.
And you know, I don't think you have to like.
You don't think I have to do this?
No. I mean,
Okay.
You need that. It's funny. You need to do that for the people in the room. So it depends on how many people.
Yeah. Well, I just put this around. I have no idea, but that way.
But for Zoom, it's pretty expensive.
Let's see if I am actually.
Anyway, the guy had one of two doctors who does anterior hip surgery.
Oh,
Which means they spread the muscle that goes in the front of the leg, exposed
Wow.
to the back of the leg.
it shows I'm connected, but it isn't bringing up internet. That's weird. Okay, let's try this again. I might disconnect and connect. Well, that one's comfortable. Have a seat in that one. Yeah. I mean, you're the first one here, so. And that's the way I would look at it. I've been good. Good, busy. Always. Hey, hi Al. Hi Nina.
You're with Nina, right?
You're with Nina.
Well, I don't know. You met Al. Your mask on? I'm not sure.
For some reason, this is weird that the internet isn't working. Why
I
isn't
moved that chair back there and I was thinking I was gonna sit there in case I wanted to leave.
No, leaving quickly. Why won't this? Okay,
That's more awful wonderful.
I know, kind of crazy, right? God,
Walked into the bank about a half an hour ago. And Chase over there on the Alpha Dam across the main highway. And meeting that place. It's crazy. No, Chase Bank. Oh my God.
so the internet says it's working, but it's not working. Oh, maybe it is working.
Yes, it was over in a flash.
Vacations seem to do that.
Yes, they do. Yes.
You just have to take more, apparently.
Oh, that sounds nice.
What's that? That means he's on. That's right. He's
Shit, why isn't this working?
layers on to the.
It's really.
He layers
irritating.
on to finance.
Who are you talking
No,
about?
that would be Jackie. But I would guess he just
Just on.
curious. I mean, any board member, would probably want to be here, I think. If they can.
Okay, I don't understand how the internet is not working for me. Very irritating. I'm going to try this.
short list. For certain, whatever that,
And? Do you believe?
I know. But I heard it from, medical rep that lives in our neighborhood that Dr. Kim was operating on his knee on October 4th. And, he said, oh yeah, you're on the short list.
How does he know? Oh, because that's what he did?
Well, no, he just figures that they wouldn't have put me in his prior experience, so they would not have me on a 2-hour Zoom. Pre-surgery, if I was to have an operation, no persistence.
That does make sense, right? Oh, here we go. That's the one I want. Okay. Now let's see.
Vacation time?
Yes. Oh, nice.
What part? What part is in? Girls,
That's a nice part. Oh, that works out nice.
there you go. Well, I'm going down Wednesday to see my grandson and daughter. So, love it down there. We're in Bennett Point. That's, and you don't ever have to take me to the short. Whether it's in the 80s, to change it.
Oh, this took a long time to hook up. Ah,
It's flying or driving. Flying or driving.
hey, Peter.
Hi, Peter. There's coffee in the kitchen. There's coffee. If you're interested. No? Oh, I said there's coffee in the kitchen. Coffee.
Thank you. This is my time of day for alcohol.
I don't have that available. Well, actually, outreach committee probably has some in there.
Is this reserved?
Nope, no, have a seat. I was just trying to make sure that people could see the screen, so I just spread some chairs out. Hi, Carol.
Have a seat wherever you'd like.
Right. That's why you would,
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
fine, thank you.
Good. So they did a good job on your house? Or they, actually, they're not starting yet.
there yet.
That's right. I think
getting
you're
there.
next.
Tomorrow's supposed to be the day, but I hear they're a couple
Oh,
weeks
Okay,
behind, but
okay. Yeah, I think the heat wave, caught them unawares. And I think when they start a new job like this, there's always like a period.
they figure it out,
Yeah.
learning curve.
Yeah. So, but so far the reports have been good from the homeowners.
I
that
think some things
Yeah,
that's taking place in my alley there.
yeah, good,
Seems to be
good, good.
And the dogs are really.
Do you need a
They
special
seem
food.
so
You want
nice,
something
don't
to
they?
eat?
I know. I'm just so happy that the board selected that company. Yeah, I know, so far, so far.
Yeah.
It's early, I recognize that. I'm glad that you didn't have to take down your awning. though.
Yeah, and I was, actually, I had them scheduled
Okay,
and I just happened to walk by my place. I said, "Maybe here." Yeah, it's good. Take that down.
I suggested she be here, but it's here. She's not on there.
so we'll have to let us. Oh, are you?
I told I was gonna have a good one in Colton, but
Yeah.
I was recognizing, then they'd be restricted. And they charged 70 an hour. And that was to take it down and put it back up. But then I felt like I was at least.
Oh, well,
covered.
I agree. I mean, if you had to do it, it's good to work with the company that installed it because you don't want to void your warranty or anything like that. But yay, they can work around it. That's the important thing, you know, so that's.
And then in January, when I had this had come up, coming from a big old house where you're constantly doing the hair singing on my hip as well. And I said, yeah, that's pretty bad.
No, you're unusual, I think, in that.
Yeah.
Some folks, it's all.
Now they're doing the background.
See,
Yes, sir.
on the
When the nurse.
budget thing is the parking lots included in the.
It is in the patrol
In the
line.
patrol.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
parking boss plus parking or the actual patrol. service.
They don't, because I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah,
You probably don't lump it in.
yep, that's exactly what it is.
That kind of, I've been.
Yeah. Well, I always use your house as an example, Marjorie, when people ask about having an awning with those beams, because you did it so. It's just lifesaver. It's like the poster child. Yeah, you designed it really well. Yes, yes, exactly. Ooh.
Ready to go.
Glad. Glad you are.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice meeting you. Live in. In Dunbar. You're married. Same alley, no? I live over on Vander. And now. I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like a season ticket. Yeah, yeah. Can you see them? Yeah, a little bit. And COVID stopped a lot of things. When you think about things that should be invented for a period of time, that it's been like 3 years, some of the things, yeah. Yeah, did you get yours?
Oh, you told me, Jack.
Last year I got mine. There were two documents. Yeah, only been twice. Yes. Yes, kind of across the.
Across the. She promised to tell me about the wall.
I will, yeah, I was gonna text you.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I knew you would.
Like to meet a neighbor.
I showed you, I'm Marjorie Cantor in okay, I live.
I used to live at 15.
Hey Tara, hey Will.
Okay.
So you've been here since the beginning.
Yes.
Well, it's the first one I've ever been to. Do you know Carol?
I don't think so.
Marty, was it?
You look familiar, I can.
Yeah.
And Marty Dyer.
Oh, not the other one.
Yeah, I ran into Marty Broad.
Is Betsy in this Nepenthe Association thing? Is she-
I am. Hi.
Betsy, I'm just wondering if it would be easier if, I mean, it would be better for,
Here I am.
are you able to like share documents and?
Yes.
You're just a little like person on a, like there are a bunch of little people. that we can't.
Yeah,
really-
right. Here, I'll stand up so you can see me.
Oh, hi, welcome back from your vacation.
And then I will tell you who is in the room.
Okay.
So you can put it on your attendance. Marty Dyer from 1443 University, Margie Knauer, 1333 Commons, Carol Duke, 205 Dunbarton. We have Peter Pelkifer, 1101 Dunbarton, 1019 Dunbarton, Mary Gray, 615.
Okay,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Mary is on the committee, 615 Dunbarton, and Aubrey is here on the committee also from 609, 605 Dunbarton. And then we have some other homeowners. We have Don Elwanger from 1221 Vanderbilt, and Alan and Nina White from 1109 Dunbarton, Kathy Schmidt Walsh from 708 to 702 Elmhurst, and Jim Shaw from 608 Elmhurst. So those are
I'm
all
sorry,
the homeowners.
what's Kathy's last name again?
Walsh.
All right. You can correct my spelling on people's last names
Okay.
later.
Okay.
Nice to see everybody there.
Okay. And then there's been a request here in the room if the committee members and board members online could also introduce themselves.
I am Jackie Corbitas. I'm here.
Hi, Jackie. How was your
Hi.
vacation?
It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Oh,
Till
that's
I got COVID,
oh no.
No.
and I'm recovered. I just have a
Okay.
cold. That's why I didn't show up. I have a cold.
And Jackie is our treasurer.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yes, and our committee liaison.
I'm Cheryl Nelson, board member, and secretary of the board.
Hi, Cheryl.
Ron Baker is here.
President.
And Marcus Dasher, I'm here too.
Hi, Marcus, John, glad to have you. Okay, so we usually don't have a ton of people, and usually the observers observe and there's not a lot of conversation. But I want to acknowledge the fact that this is our first look at the budget, and there's naturally a lot of concern about costs. And I also just want to assure everybody on the call and in the room that we are also concerned about costs. But I also want to let people know that we have considered budgets in the past too. And so just to kind of acknowledge the fact that we have been thinking and looking at these budgets and considering costs, and that we want to know your thoughts, but we also would love it if you would also just kind of listen to the kinds of things that we're talking about and considering, knowing that some things are just regular increases that we have to kind of just, take as we do. Increases that might come from the county or insurance, or they're just kind of regular cost increases, and other things are new to the budget and we need to discuss a little bit more. Some things are, of course, are relevant to other board members that might affect budgets also. And this may be the first time that the board members have seen these budgets. So I would just encourage everybody to be in a more listening and considering kind of mode as we talk and discuss these things, and write down questions. We were thinking that if people were on Zoom, they could submit them in the chat function. But if we talk a lot and hear people's concerns and objections that also we share, we won't get time to get through the budget. So I just kind of like to save a lot of comments and discussion to another forum. And we would love to think about ways to get people thinking about how we can budget things better. But that might be better for some kind of forum separate from this meeting. Team, other committee members, any comments? And just know that we can't hear a thing you're saying if you're talking amongst yourselves in the room. So if you have Mary or Aubrey, if you have something to say, grab that microphone from Betsy. Or I'm sure she probably has more than one, hopefully.
And one of the things
Susan,
that
I
would
wanted
just like-
to, I wanted to say that all these homeowners came, and I feel that their opinions are valid as homeowners. This is a big concern, and that all meetings that we have allow for a homeowner forum. And so I'm assuming that will occur today. Perhaps at the end of the meeting is where you'd like to have it, but I believe that it's a necessary part of our meeting is to include their opinions and their concerns.
And as you know, Mary, because I wrote you in an email saying this, and I know that you're just saying this out loud just for the, for the recording and for everybody's benefit, that I totally share your thoughts on this. And the way we make good decisions is by having other people's opinions too. And one reason I'm encouraging people to be listening more in this first part is so that they can give more informed kinds of opinions, maybe towards the end, or maybe in a different forum if we just completely run out of time. But thank you for that. And it's always good to encourage people for their participation. It's really gratifying to see 14 people on the call and a bunch of people in the room. It really is a testimony to your ability to get people stirred up and interested in the process. So thank you for that. Betsy, can I just ask for some update on your discussions with the city about the water billing? Because I know that this affects your operations budget. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you can tell us.
Correct. Yeah. So the last email that I received from the city noted that we need to have a meeting with the superior of the person I was dealing with. So we have not scheduled that, but John and I will be attending that meeting and hopefully negotiating a better time to switch the billing over than January, as we haven't received very good data to date about really the actual water usage that we've had over the past year. So I hope that we can get that meeting scheduled in the next week or two.
Okay. Any questions about that from the committee?
Susan, the first issue on the agenda is approval of minutes. I think we ought to, just a point of order, we ought to get that out of the way.
Oh, I believe it was approved via email. Will, was it not?
Oh, okay, that's all right.
Yeah, but thank you for noting that. I'm just going to put that you noted that the notes were approved via email.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move on to the draft reserve budget, shall we?
Susan, I have a question. In our last meeting, Will and I both wanted the time frame for when painting and siding is done to be looked at, because we're using 25-year paint and 50-year siding, and the cycle that's in the reserve is 6 years, which doesn't make sense.
Agreed. Betsy, can you let us know, have you talked to Bob about that, about the cycles for painting and siding?
Not yet. All of the directors have been provided with the pages from the reserve study that show these pages, basically. That's the first one, starting with the painting. So all of the directors will be meeting an executive session Wednesday, and this will be a discussion under contract, since this deals with our contract with Bob Browning. And that's exactly what the board will be addressing. So they have actually had this as a homework item since the last open board meeting to go through these useful lives, remaining lives, and be ready to challenge Bob on these. So any input, obviously, from this committee will be conveyed as well, so that Bob can do all of the edits at once.
Yeah, well, I know that the Duratemp has a warranty of 50 years. So at the very least, Bob would be likely to put a 30-year life on it.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
knowing-
Point of clarification on that, though, the Duratemp has a 50-year life, but we're only replacing a small portion of the siding with Duratemp. So when we say we've got 50-year life in terms of our painting and replacement cycle, for those people listening who haven't been clued in on that, it doesn't mean that we suddenly have 50-year life on all our siding. It's only going to be a relatively small percentage of the siding.
That's a really great point, Will. And I'm wondering if you want to just elaborate on that a little bit more, or Betsy, if you know, have more precise information about how much of the siding the contractor is looking at replacing. Do you want to explain just a little bit of the principle, Will, and then maybe Betsy can
Okay.
follow up?
Okay, just very briefly, historically, we were on a 6-year cycle. At one point, we went to a 12-year cycle that turned out to double our cost. We readjusted to us. There was a discussion of an 8-year versus 6-year. I don't know where the board is right now on that issue, but separating the painting cycle from the siding cycle creates additional expenses and difficulty. I mean, we have historically done the painting and the siding in unison, because you're going to have to paint all the new siding that goes up. And that's
Will,
usually.
sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering if you can explain more about the decisions, how the decisions get made about what siding to replace, and knowing that we've had the T111, which is plywood for everyone's information, with these lower cycles, how the decisions get made to replace parts of that with this other stuff that looks just the same, but lasts a lot longer.
Essentially, in every siding cycle, there's an initial survey to see how many sheets are conspicuously deteriorated. Inevitably, and we do a contract for that separately. That gives us a rough estimate of what the cycle is going to be. Once the cycle begins, inevitably, as you tear off sheets, you find that there's more damage to other sheets that isn't visible from the exterior, and there's always more replacement than was originally estimated. What was decided this year is, for the first time, there is available a product which can be replaced sheet for sheet. with the T111. That hasn't existed up until recently because the thickness was different and the installation was different. So we're going with a long-lasting product, sheet for sheet, as we replace the siding going around all of Nepenthe, which is usually a couple of years process. And over time, this is eventually going to, over a very extended period of time, this will eventually eliminate the T111. Probably not in my lifetime or the lifetime of many of the people listening, but because to replace it all at one time would be a massive expense. So that's the cycle we're into. We're going to end up with at the end of this next replacement cycle with a mixture of T111 and the longer lasting synthetic sidings. And with the following cycle, the same thing will happen, et cetera, until finally the very last piece of T111 goes away somewhere long down the road. So we don't want to pull off perfectly good T111 and throw it away.
What percent of the siding do you think is will be replaced over the next 3 years? Like this is now beginning the first phase of this siding.
Betsy could probably give me a better, I would say somewhere around 10 or 15%, but Betsy could correct me.
Right. Well, and every unit is different depending on its exposure, depending on the vegetation
Right.
around it. So overall, I think 10% sounds about right.
Right. The other thing you have to understand is that we replace siding in between cycles, which is actually more expensive per sheet. We typically, our bidding process is for a number of sheets to be replaced. But in between times, as houses sell and termite inspections are conducted, it's not uncommon for the inspection to reveal that several sheets of siding need to be replaced mid-cycle, and that's always more expensive. We've already shifted in that process, as I understand it, away from T111.
Yeah.
Well, the other point is that, and you brought this up earlier, is we no longer water the siding. We've changed the sprinkler system to drip, so we don't damage the siding as much, which is a big deal. And the other thing is, it's not just the lifespan of the siding. We're putting 25-year paint on purpose on the houses, so it's a longer cycle. So it's a twofer. We're gonna replace siding and we're going to paint. So it makes sense. 6 years does not make sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to is that Mary? Thank you for that. I also just want to point out to everyone that we have money in this reserve budget yearly for doing what Will was just saying, for doing siding replacements on things that are shown to need replacement. And are you just kind of showing that, Betsy?
Yes, that's this line under the 4,204, wood, siding and trim, ongoing repairs, yearly work orders. So there is a fund for that, but you definitely pay a higher cost because, you're mobilizing maybe just to take care of one unit at a time compared to mobilizing to take care of 172 units. I do have some concerns that as the siding work progresses, there are some sheets of T111 that may never need to be replaced. But the paint may wear differently on those. We just don't know until we've gone down the road. I agree, 6 years is much too short, and you could probably put it out. I'm not an expert, but it feels like 10 years could be a reasonable expectation.
And the reason for that is it affects the amount that homeowners need to pay to the reserve. And so it's really important to have a more accurate number there. And 6 years isn't right.
Well, six years may not be right. 10 years may be too. I mean, when we went out 12, we definitely paid
This
a
is
price for
Aubrey
it.
from, I'm in the room at the
whatever this building's called.
Hi, Aubrey.
This giant room with all these lovely people.
It's called a clubhouse, Aubrey.
There we go. There we go. So I'm just trying to follow the conversation here and circle back to the original agenda item. And it's, we're supposed to review the draft budget. We've brought up this issue of timing for the painting and the siding cycles repeatedly. And we know that we need Bob, who is the expert, to come in and help provide some advice and direction and update this. I also heard Betsy mention that there's a list of some other updates that need to be made that have not been yet made. So I'm wondering, what exactly are we discussing right now? And what's the purpose and the goal? If we don't have an updated draft reserve budget to look at, then I'm not sure what role the finance committee can play in providing that information and feedback to the board without seeing an updated version. I'm not sure what the goal here is.
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. I mean, that's a really great point. And I think maybe part of this discussion is partly just to educate all the observers, all the homeowners about what like the big ticket items are in the budget and what the considerations are. And with the painting cycles, it's really, as you say, the board hasn't even discussed this yet. They are hopefully will have well, they probably won't have a revision of this draft budget by the time they meet for the board meeting. But just to kind of talk about some of the considerations are helpful. I mean, just the fact that other things have changed besides the fact that we're putting in this Duratemp siding that has a longer life, but we still have this T111 that has a shorter life. But, on the other hand, we also have these yearly, we go through the painting and siding and kind of take a look at things yearly so that we should be able to catch the things that are falling apart, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think
again, Susan, I've heard this and we've had this conversation several times, which is why I'm trying to get to like, what exactly are we trying to do right now? I believe we captured a lot of these considerations and questions in our notes from our previous meetings, which will get passed on to the board, right, when they review this.
Mhm.
So is our goal, it is one of our goals right now to be making a list of those items? I mean, I heard you say we're also doing a little bit of like review for the folks that are new to sitting in our meeting for education purposes, which is totally fine as well. I just don't want us to be spending, we have a lot on the agenda and I don't want to spend tons of time reviewing things that we've already discussed and that are already
Yeah.
captured.
It's taking too long to explain that you don't want to take too long.
I think the point is well taken. The board, we've looked at this issue of the cycle. We've recommended that the board consider adjusting the cycle. It now becomes a board decision. I don't know that nobody on this committee possesses the expertise, the specialized expertise to advise the board any farther, I think, than what we've already done. So I think we've done what we can do with this issue.
All right. Well, I'm happy to move on. We've talked about the painting and the siding and the cycles, and I think everybody is sort of up to date. Also to a certain extent, like, I'm not sure Mary knows what we've been talking about over the past year or so. And so, also just kind of want to assure her that it's, I don't want to dismiss her concerns. But let her know that we have talked about it and hadn't made recommendations. Although when it comes up on this reserve budget, then as like not reflecting our many conversations about the cycles, then it is sort of like, okay, let's bring it up again and just put it in these minutes too.
Susan, it's Betsy. Is the committee at all interested in going through the list? Like, for example, on the screen right now, we have the clubhouse rehab. And believe it or not, we're pretty close to the 10-year mark. Now, the study says that at the 10-year mark, the association has an allocation here and should consider whether perhaps 50% of the furniture is due for replacement. So, I don't know if you want to be that granular or if you just want to put a recommendation to the board that they, really look at these components and address them with Bob. I don't know.
I think it's interesting to hear the items that you've identified as needing reconsideration. What do you all feel? And I want to maybe I can always check in with you later, Betsy, if I'm the only one interested in knowing.
Okay.
Susan,
But-
this is Aubrey. I did put in the chat earlier that I don't know if this is the most recent draft that we've received. I couldn't find it in my email. I was looking for it the other day. So I'm not sure that it would be the best use of time for us to sit here and go line by line, but I would love the opportunity to look at the most recent version if we haven't already, and correct me if you guys sent this to me like months ago.
No.
This is it. And
Okay.
This is it, but it was
maybe-
sent as a link by, I think, Betsy originally. So if you were looking for an attachment, I
Oh,
might have
okay.
sent it out again, but that's probably why it was hard to find.
I think
But
it
yeah,
would be
this-
worthwhile, maybe, like I said, I don't know that it's a great use of time for us to sit here and go line by line, but I would be willing to, after our meeting, definitely work to review it and make a list of items that I think are worth looking at and maybe flag for Bob as he's doing the review and the update. And I think it would be worth all of our committee members and Betsy with your expertise, if we
Yeah.
can start a running list, if you don't already have one.
Yeah, I do. And that is also what the board is working on. So my goal is just that we all
Yes.
work towards this. And then at one thing is transmitted to Bob so he can do it all at once. So excellent. Well, if the committee will do that, I would really appreciate it. And just
Can
so
you-
you,
Send us your list, Betsy. Would that might
Yeah.
be,
yeah, you could send it as a list if that's easiest, or if you go to nepenthehoa.com, on the finance committee page is this draft of the reserve study. That is here for anybody who wants to look at the full draft. I believe it's at the very bottom. Oh, nope, just the final reserve study. Okay. It's such a big, I can't email it, so I will put it there and then you can access it right on the finance committee page. So if you see some allocations that just don't make sense, we can transmit that to Bob Browning and he can hopefully move it to where it's appropriate.
Okay, so we've talked about, I think the important thing for homeowners and myself are what are the big numbers in our reserve study? So the big numbers are siding and painting. What are the other big
Roofs,
numbers
The
for
roof.
Huh?
The roofs.
roof? And is there any other big numbers? I mean,
The
Tree.
next, would
Pardon
be
me?
asphalt and trees, I think.
landscaping.
Yeah.
And the difference, like the landscaping for those who are on occurs, the money in the reserve is spent annually. Am I correct? For the reserve on the landscaping, isn't it in there like the tree
I believe
trimming
you're going
and
to
all of
have to
that?
separate landscaping because there's subsections of landscaping. There is the regular maintenance like leaf blowing, and then there is the ongoing tree maintenance in order to extend the useful life or the living life of those trees. So I think Mary, you have brought this up as well before, and I think it's just a matter of maybe perhaps defining those subsections within the budget to separate truly the different types of landscaping costs that are incurred and the difference between the operating and the reserve expenditures. And if we shifted all those reserve amounts into the operating, it should not change our HOA fees if we are budgeting correctly. Just that if we have a massive tree removal due to weather or whatnot, then that could wind up being a special assessment for the homeowners.
I think, Tara, that it would affect the yearly HOA dues quite a bit, actually.
Dramatically.
It
Because
really.
If it goes
shouldn't.
up and down, yes.
Yeah, and just shifting the costs over, it's not a dollar for dollar kind of shift because we've been paying kind of for this year's allocation for years past. So it's not shifting what we have to pay for this particular year. It's shifting everything onto the backs of homeowners for this year instead of using the kind of pay layaway plan payment schedules.
Well, it would create less uniformity, but in the long term, I think Tara's right. The long-term cost is going to be the same. The difference is that if it's in reserves, you can level it out from one year to the next.
Correct.
So that if you have a number of landscaping restoration projects in a single year, or you have a big windstorm that damages multiple trees in a single year, you don't get slammed with everything in that year's operating. So I mean, you can argue the landscaping either way, but it is a long-term investment. It's an asset. And, you know, the tree life is 30 years, 40 years, just like, you know, it's got longer life than a lot of the siding. And certainly the irrigation, the whole irrigation system is analogous to other systems that we have to replace or maintain periodically. So I don't see we gain anything by moving it to operate.
I'm not talking about moving it. I'm talking about awareness and knowledge. So by having it just in the reserves, no one understands the expenditures, because what homeowners see is the operating cost and a summary statement for reserves. So my point is, if costs are pretty much annual, such as tree trimming and leaf blowing and those kinds of things, they need to they can stay in reserves, but homeowners need to be aware of them. They need to be aware that those are additional costs that are being paid for annually. They're just in reserves. So they're actually sort of an operating cost, but they're coming out of reserves.
So Mary, what you're proposing is that we send out a reserve financial statement the same way that an operating financial statement is, so you can see the activity. Would that satisfy what you're suggesting?
Well, it sounds good to me, but I think the reason that I want to hear from homeowners, hopefully by the end of the day. So, but yeah, I think we have to be transparent and fully disclose what we're spending.
I don't think it's not being transparent. I think the information is available. It's just a matter of how do you distill this volume of information into a succinct format. And certainly I've offered up, I'm happy to go through any of this detail and explain it. I do know it inside and out. I can't tell you as far as the useful life, some of the stuff that Browning comes up with is industry standard, and he may be conservative on it. But I'm happy to go through this, as I had the same questions you did when I first started living here.
Well, Tara, I've gone through them too, and I understand it as well. I don't need explanations. I really do get it. My point is that I'm aware of it, you're aware of it, but a lot of other people aren't. That's
So
the
I was asking
transparency
you
I'm
if
talking
there's an
about.
opportunity to present a financial statement that you feel would represent the homeowner's voice. It appears that you are aware of what the homeowners are seeking.
Well,
so if there's a way to,
I love this discussion, and I think it's really useful in thinking about just communicating and understanding how we're spending our money. But I wonder if we should, like, I'm kind of taking Aubrey's point of maybe we should get through the stuff that we have to get through with the budgets, and then come back to this and think about maybe some other method of making aware to homeowners how money is being spent. That maybe it includes, operations and reserves all on the same budget, and talks about money in a different way or something. And Mary, we could maybe just take some time at another meeting to discuss this kind of thing, because it's an important thing just to think about for the future. But as Aubrey pointed out, we've got a lot of things on our schedule today. So if you don't mind, could we put a pin in this discussion and come back to it?
Yeah, and that's why we did the presentation last year, and I understand we're contemplating again this year, which I thought was outstanding. So for those people who are really interested, it takes time to sit down and explain where all the money goes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it sounds like, well, Betsy, are you gonna get us information about the items that you've identified? We're gonna get you information on the things that we have questions about, because certainly we don't know for sure, but we might take a look at things and go, oh, that's weird.
Right. I
Are-
think after the executive session on Wednesday, I'll have a better understanding of what the board is wanting to have in the reserve study and when, and then that information can be shared as they direct.
Okay. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So shall we move on to the operating budget?
Okay, so I will bring that up. Okay. I just want to make sure I've got the right one. Okay, so I have prepared two drafts. One is including a line item for flood insurance. My understanding is that the Insurance, Legal and Safety Committee may be making a recommendation to the board. And I don't know if the board would accept it, but they may be recommending that the board do away with paying for flood insurance from homeowner dues and instead allowing each homeowner to shop for their best insurance policy. But we'll look at the one where we do have the flood insurance just as we always do. And that is one of our biggest line items. And it's actually at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And we'll get there eventually. Okay. So insurance has gone up 25% over this year's. And so we are looking at a premium of $136,440. And that is for the hazard insurance on all of the units. And of course, the normal commercial package for the association that includes the clubhouses and the directors and officers liability insurance. And then this flood insurance number here at $402,012 is a assumption of a 6% increase over last year. 6% chosen because that's basically the current rate of inflation. But the early indicators from Russo Insurance is that it is going to be higher than that actually. So those are two very big drivers. I mean, last year, the insurance, the hazard and unit insurance was 109,092, and we're looking at 136,440. That's pretty big.
Betsy, we had this rebate on last year's.
Yeah.
And I know that they're doing a reanalysis of flood insurance. They're increasing flood insurance costs in some places, decreasing it in others.
Yeah.
Do we have any reason to believe we're given that rebate that we're on the increased side?
Yes, even with that rebate, because as you point out, some are less and some are more, but when you shake them all out, 590 units, it's looking like it's still going to be more than what we paid. And
It isn't the units that drive it though. It's the geographic location.
Correct. It is the geographic location, but even at that, it hasn't been logical. So you can have two units right next to each other. You would assume they were close enough, and one has a premium that's $100 higher than the other. Brownies. So that's pretty unusual. And we don't have that number yet. So that is one of the things that makes this still a draft budget, is waiting for that flood insurance number.
Betsy, can I just ask a quick question? So you said the 6% isn't anywhere near what you're assuming they're going to come back with. What is the indication? What's the actual indication?
I'm trying to remember the emails. I feel like it's like another 25% higher than last year is what I've recall hearing from Tina Keel from Russo. So, but we'll know that Insurance Legal and Safety Committee is speaking to Russo, and they should have a report for the board by Wednesday. So that's one of the big drivers. The other thing, of course, is also the discussion about the water cost. And so we have a section here for utilities and just working on what we do have from the water actual usage. We think we are looking at an annual budget of $246,000 for water for inside the units and for all of the irrigation. And of course, obviously that's an entirely new expense for us. The average of actuals for the last 12 months is 48,000. And that's just primarily for irrigation water that is under the association's control. So I think that's the one that homeowners should really know that that's coming. And this is just
Betsy, sorry to interrupt, but do you want to just super briefly give a little bit more information about the whole water bill thing?
Yeah. So traditionally, when Nepenthe was built, there were no water meters, and the city felt that to cover their costs, they would assess homeowners based on a flat rate, and it was intended that that flat rate would cover their internal water and the irrigation being used by the property, because it's our own private water supply. And it always has been. The only difference now is that it is being measured as it comes in from the public supply. And so instead of the homeowners being billed individually, the bills will come to Nepenthe Association and it would become part of the dues. And so, you know, on the one hand, you would see an increase. And now you can see on my spreadsheet here, it says a monthly unit cost of $34.75 per unit per month. But this budget number is assuming only 6 months worth of billing. We're going to ask the city to give us good data and hold off on billing us until July. So this is July through December. And then obviously in the next year, it would be basically double this to account for 12 months worth of billing.
And the offset averages what, about $40 per unit per month?
I think it's more like 70, all
70?
told, 70, yeah.
Well, we have to, it's not the entire bill because some of that is for
Street
storm drainage.
sweeping, right.
Betsy, I thought the number was coming in per unit at 71.
It is. But like I said, this
Okay.
is assuming only that we're going to start taking over that billing for 6 months rather than a whole year.
So what you're saying is instead of waiting for the billing to come in July or whatever it is, the budget is going to begin building in the cost. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
How come?
Well, because we don't usually
An
pass
annual
a
budget.
mid-year budget, right? I mean,
But you
we-
can pass a mid-year adjustment, couldn't you?
Well,
Wouldn't the mid-year adjustment though then increase it? So we wouldn't have the $70, we would be, if we're flat, then $70 hits us in July,
Yeah.
correct?
Right.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
But
So I
this
didn't-
week, she's adjusted
it's-
for that so that we're only paying 35 a month starting in January, so that we don't
For
have. to
all
do an
12 months,
adjustment
not
for all 12
70.
months. So it
Mhm.
is adjusting for that. They're not charging us 70 a
right.
month.
But you're not being double charged, but it may feel that way if you're getting your $70 bill from the city of Sacramento and your dues have gone up $35. But in July, you'll no longer be getting billed from the city $70 per month, and you will be being billed basically $35 a month in your dues. So it does balance out, but it's a way of encapsulating it in a one-year budget. Yeah.
I would like the board to consider a mid-year increase when we actually have to pay it. I mean, it's just a consideration that I'm putting forth because then it's accurate. We can do, I mean, you guys can change our bills like that. I mean, it isn't a big deal, right? And so.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, they
I'm
seem
not
to,
on
they
the
seem to be,
billing
they
side
seem
of
to go
it,
up
so
magically.
I don't know.
But anyway, I would ask that the board at least consider that.
Okay, well, and I'm sure Susan, you're going to put that in your minutes.
Is there a motion? I mean, we
I'll
haven't
second.
talked
Okay,
about
I
it.
can make-
It's,
Sure.
yeah, I can say
I'll
Mary
second.
suggested that, but,
Okay.
I'll go ahead
make
and
a
second
motion.
that, sure.
okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind if the motion is to inform the board of the option. I vote aye. If it's to direct the board
Well, I
or
can't
recommend to
direct
the
the
board that they do it, I vote no. I wasn't clear on what the motion. Was.
Okay, it's not directing because I don't have the authority to direct.
Well,
so.
right, recommend.
Well, and I kind of like that idea just because to me, there's no no assurance that they'll actually start billing us in July. There's no assurance people will stop getting billed, you know, all sorts of things kind of come up. So it just gives us a bit more flexibility, but you know, the board will do what they will do based on you know, a lot of things.
May I
So
suggest a slight modification? And Mary, I don't know if this would work for you, but that rather than just saying July, like when they actually do that billing.
yeah, okay.
Okay, does that work for you, Mary?
That is perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that takes care of the water costs. Most of the other increases. Oh, Betsy, did you want to talk a little bit about staffing increases? That's the only other like non-regular increase, I think. Am I
Correct. Yeah, and I'll give a little history on that. You know, for many years here, there was a full-time handyman, a full-time assistant community manager, full-time general manager, and a part-time weekend receptionist. And in 2018, our handyman retired, and we replaced that position with a full-time assistant community manager, which really helped with the administrative burden. And that was Christina Romero. When she left for another position in May of 2021, that position was not backfilled. And we have been operating short-staffed ever since. And I am asking the board to bring back a handyman on staff. Some of the plus of that would be, you know, an anticipated decrease in repair and maintenance costs because currently we use a contracted service for that now. And that contract could be terminated and instead rolled into personnel. But things happen all throughout the week, and it's not always wise or feasible to have to wait for the once a week handyman repair or to wait for another service provider, you know, that is going to charge a truck charge just to come out and maybe change a light bulb in a lollipop or you know, pick up a dead animal or some small, or blow out a you know, pay a roofer to come and blow out a clogged gutter when you could have an on-staff handyman do that. So I am going to be asking the board to increase the payroll line to account for that. And that is GL number 19124. And the increase is
about
from
66,000.
yeah, so from 174,000 budgeted for 2022, even though we're running below that because we are short-staffed, it would be an increase up to 240,000 for on-site staff per year.
I'm
So
just looking at the annual variance amount, which is 66,000.
yes, yes.
Well, it's actually,
How much are we?
It's actually less, right? Because it's offset by the gains in losing the contract.
And how much are we paying on that contract right now?
The contract right now for the handyman is 2,300 something a month.
2,300 a month.
Yeah,
So this is going to increase the cost to homeowners. Is that what I'm hearing?
it is. It will increase the cost of the homeowners, correct?
Yeah.
To provide a
So we're-
higher service level.
Well, have there been, I mean, before homeowners don't want increase in dues. We have a lot of things. I would actually encourage a poll of homeowners because, I mean, we're looking at an opportunity to actually not increase the dues. And I mean, I think there should be a choice, a balance.
Well, and that's what the board is elected to look at.
Okay,
they
so
may-
that's a recommendation I have.
I had a related question. I was reviewing through the draft budget. GL number 18957, janitorial extra labor.
Correct.
Does that number get impacted at all if we hire an on-site handyman?
Yeah, and this year,
Because it looks like it went up in our
yeah,
budget.
this year we saw a big increase. And I did increase it here, but you're right. It could go down. And in fact, that was one of the things that I was planning to recommend to the board is that the full-time handyman could fill in when the janitors have because it's a 4-day-a-week service. So on those other days, the handyman could go in and do some of the bathroom cleanup and that kind of thing. So yes, that could decrease as well. And possibly even to some degree gutter and downspout. But what we have found is the actual proposals that came in for gutter and downspout cleaning were much, much higher than what was spent last year. So that probably needs to be adjusted up as well.
Right, you're thinking that the handyman could take some of the gutter and
Yeah.
downspout?
Yeah, because there are times when we have called for extra service because, we know there's a storm coming. Homeowners reporting that they're already impacted by leaves in their downspout. And so to prevent water intrusion into the house, we'll have a service call out for a one-time cleaning or one building cleaning.
I think Betsy, it would probably be really helpful for the board. And I mean, I know that it would be helpful for us, but just, really think about all the savings in various line items where, having a full-time handyman would help out from
Right.
janitorial service to gutter and downspout. Because I mean, I think, Mary is right. People are going to go like, more money, please, no. And,
Right.
kind of looking for ways ahead of time to make sure that the guy has got plenty to do. I mean, the Lord knows there's plenty to do around here. But making it count in the budget will be really key, I think.
Sure.
And how does it change all the other additional costs? So it's not just payroll. Aren't there like 3 lines that affect
Correct.
staff?
There is the payroll processing fees. There is, so that would go up by, so it's right here on the bottom. So currently, okay, so there we go. So the current approved budget right now is $6,240 and it would go to $8,700. And then there's also the payroll burden, which is the taxes and benefits.
And how much would that change?
We are actually still refining that number with the people down at First Service, but I think I have a placeholder here if I can find it. On-site staff. Reimbursable.
Shouldn't it be in the on-site
There
staff?
it is, 19247, payroll, taxes and benefits. So currently that budget is 84,000 and I've increased it to 96,000.
So we have to consider the whole picture of the costs and the savings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm,
Okay. I think just so the board's aware.
Well, the board will no doubt be aware, but you know, kind of, I think what your point is really kind of highlighting what all the costs will be, and then also highlighting where the savings will be too. And it's always nice to be able to highlight it with numbers, because I mean, no doubt, it's just, you know, it's much nicer for somebody to respond right away to, you know, something, a homeowner's need.
Mhm.
But it's hard to kind of, it's hard to estimate what the
Right.
cost
And
value is.
some of the burden is harder to quantify.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hoping that this handyman can really help with some of the requests for proposals, preparing scopes of work for projects that need to be done, like, you know, asphalt work, concrete work. Right now, I'm doing that. And I don't know how much more stretched thin I can be without some further assistance. So that's a little harder to quantify. And you know, I mean, that's again, it's a board decision. And you know, what they decide will help inform my decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, and I think we're just sort of pointing out that I think it'll help them to think about these gutter and downspout savings, and you know, things that they can just pinpoint on here too.
Yeah, I think those are the biggest drivers. Let me just increase number for staffing, renewal, package went up, flood insurance. Okay, yeah, ILS, okay, we went over that. Yeah, so I think those are the biggest drivers. And so the net effect of those items does, you know, first, so just so you know, when I'm working on the budget, I'm working on a program and I'm filling in these assumptions. And then at the end, it is, you know, as I'm doing it, it's calculating the revenue and what the monthly unit cost is. And that's right here. So this is with keeping the flood insurance. But again, I feel like that number isn't super reliable, but we are looking at a $621 monthly assessment. And then should the flood insurance go away, then that would be a $564 assessment per month. But then each homeowner would have to shop for their best deal on flood insurance.
Yes.
And
Is there a
purchase that
savings?
themselves.
Sorry to interrupt, Betsy.
No,
Is
that's
there
okay.
is there a cost? It's like a volume savings and
There
altogether?
isn't, and that was one of the things that we were that the ILS was tasking Russo to find out. And my understanding is that there was supposed to be some kind of a community savings when there was a bulk purchase, and we don't actually see that reflected in our actual premiums. And so I don't know if we're somehow, because we're a private development, we didn't qualify. I don't know, but I know the ILS can speak to that better than I can.
Okay.
Betsy, when you say shop for the best deal, I don't think, as I understand the flood insurance system, there's no such thing as a deal.
Yeah.
It's a flat cost because it's government provided insurance.
Yeah.
And so there are no deals.
Right. There are no deals. And a lot of people, you know, really like knowing that their dues pay for that cost. So
I mean, the only way you save is you just don't get flood insurance.
Yeah.
And that is actually an option since it's really an individual policy, right?
Well, it is an individual policy. And one of the things that the ILS, you know, Jerry Dunn is kind of the insurance guy on that. And he he has found that there are new ways of purchasing flood insurance, and he thinks that some homeowners can get a deal. But again, if the government is setting the flood zones and the rate, I don't know that there is a lot of variance that can be taken advantage of. I don't know.
So the other thing that all I've seen are increases, and I know that seems to be our annual deal. But are there items in this budget that we could consider? There's like new line items that I haven't ever kind of noticed before, like it's little, but a backflow device test for $6,000. And I looked it up and it said it's supposed to be done annually. Just, I don't know a lot about it. The other thing I was curious about was our security service ticket giver. Like, has anybody considered, I'd like the board to consider whether we really need that. And I don't see here where the computerized check-in for parking is.
That's also in security in the patrol service. So
Okay.
the invoice that is received monthly, there's two of them, and we can go to patrol service. Here it is, 18579. And so we get a patrol bill from Securitas for their actual time. So it varies month to month, and that's about $1,200 to $1,400. And then for the online parking pass system, it's $1 per unit. So it's $590 per month for that.
So it's like $2,000 a month for all this parking
Right.
stuff.
You can.
So I think that's something I would like the board to consider. I mean, to find something where there's a savings for homeowners.
Yeah, it's $3.90.
Whatever it is, that's coffee. I just think, I think homeowners would appreciate an effort to try and decrease.
I had a question about the backflow device test. And I know we talked about this, so I apologize if I've asked it before, but it's in here twice.
I hope it's not budgeted twice. So yeah, it's budgeted at zero. What happens, unfortunately, is when the bills are paid, if you don't use exactly the budget line item that you budgeted under, then when it creates next year's budget, it goes, oh, you wanted under 18771, but we don't. We budgeted it under land maintenance 15511. And of course it is a city, it's like your pool permit. I mean, I wish it were optional, but it is a requirement with the city. You have backflows, they have to be tested to ensure that the water is safe.
Yeah, and I vaguely remember this now that you're bringing it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe then in line 18771, just make a note, right? that
Yes, and
it's been
actually
zeroed out and just put a little note.
Oh
in the
yeah,
column.
right.
Yeah. So
And
that
I
people
think
like me can remember.
yeah, and I think too, I think I can actually eliminate it in the program that this is correct. So I'll make a note of that. Thank you. 1877.
I had another question as I was reviewing the budget, and I'm going to be a little more general rather than specific first to start with. I noticed several line items that have zero budget, but had expenses. And some of them were small and some of them were not so small. Just a couple of examples: website, AMS collection expenses, copier lease. Like the budget all says zero for the 2023 budget, and yet we had expenses on every single one of those. And those were the bigger ticket items. I saw several other smaller ticket items. And I just thought it might be helpful to remind myself and the other committee members that are newer and our homeowner attendees why we budget zero, even though we have expenses for those items.
Yeah, I don't know that we budget zero for copier lease, but AMS expenses,
I think maybe there wasn't any increase in cost on the copier lease because that was a 3-year contract. Maybe it was, you're looking at the increase in
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, so, right, so I mean, there is a budget there in, for last year and for this new year for copier lease. But some of them, you're right, AMS collection expenses. It's kind of like budgeting on people being delinquent. And so we don't usually. That's a hard, it's hard. Delinquency monitoring is sort of the same thing, except that one generally comes in as income to us because that's the late fees. And so when they're paid, they show up as on a credit side. So those two kind of cancel each other out, but it is confusing when you're reading it like this in a spreadsheet. And then there's other things that absolutely like weren't anticipated and happened. During COVID, we didn't budget much for events, community events, that kind of thing. And it was a hard thing to budget for going into 2022. And then, we have done so much more and spent a lot more on those kinds of events. So, and we had our anniversary party last year during this budget period. We didn't say, hey, let's put in a line item for that. But the money, we still wanted to celebrate 50 years. And so that money was spent. So you have some odd variances like that occur.
So on the copier lease and the community website, those are two items that I saw that the budget remained the same, even though our expenses were much higher.
Yeah. I've got to go back and look at what was expensed in community website. And, I know you guys get your financials every month. The finance committee sees them. I've made some notes throughout the year, but I just don't have them and I don't have it in front of me to think about what they are.
I just
But
wanted
the
to call them.
contract hasn't gone up. So.
Right. I just wanted to call them out because if we anticipate, right, like the copier expenses, for example, I understand
Right.
our contract is the same amount for 3 years,
Right.
but why was there such an overage this year? And do we want to budget more?
No,
next
we
year?
don't. We
I
want
know.
to
I-
save
I-
money there because that was for making too many copies. And
Well,
we
and and I totally agree, Susan. And I think my
Yeah.
point goes in the reverse too, is like,
Yeah.
okay, we don't want to increase the budget. So then how do we make sure that we don't spend
Right.
$4,000 when the line item was 2?
Right. No, I agree with you, Aubrey. And I look at things like that and I look at the average, the 12-month average of actuals and think, should I add to that? And again, it goes down to this like, well, to Mary's point, like every little thing adds up and maybe we won't spend that. or maybe we
and to
will.
everybody on this call, please don't ask for copies of things. Look at
Right.
it on your computers or your phones so that we don't have to spend a lot of money on making paper copies that just get recycled anyway.
Right.
This is a testimony to how you save money.
Yeah. And we also learned to our chagrin that, this copier lease is not generous at all with color copies. So, we're really trying to do away with all color copies completely. That's why the newsletter's gone to black and white. But yes, if people were to just read
I
everything.
just wanted to,
online.
make a note of those because
Yeah.
I totally agree. Like we don't want to increase the budget anywhere.
Yeah.
And yet a budget will be useless if it's not realistic.
True.
And
True.
I have one other question on that. So the general counsel service, I've saw like monthly where sometimes it's $4,000 and I don't see that really reflected in this. And is it because, he doesn't spend any money for 3 months and all of a sudden it's 4,000 or how does it stay at that? I mean,
Correct.
because I have seen $4,000.
Yeah, you have. And I would say he probably bills us 3 or 4 times a year, but they're big bills, but yeah. And so we have stayed within budget, which is good. But it's a big budget. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of covered most of the items. And we have a recommendation also for the board to consider. Should we move on to the financials for this past month for August?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm sorry that you got them so late. So let's take a look. I haven't, because I was on vacation, I really haven't had a chance to look at them either. The
Just
biggest.
Boost up the Zoom, Betsy. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. That's little, isn't it?
For
Okay.
me.
Yeah. So, we're still seeing an increase in our operating cash. There's been a slight dip in the reserve cash because we did have a large invoice for landscape expenses that was paid out in August. Let me go to the balance sheet. Oh gosh, okay, make it smaller. So that is exactly the cash on hand. You do have a number of reserve investment accounts. And so when we talk about that $11 million, it's spread out through all of these accounts. And then this is the reserve fund balance support schedules, and it shows a listing of the components and their general ledger numbers, and what has been contributed this year from your dues and what has been expensed through the year. So you see all that. And then the income statement, which compares the operating expenses to the budget. So for example, here with homeowner assessment revenue, the year-to-date budget is $2,581,856, but we've actually collected $2,606,000. So we're to the good there. In the easement agreement, we anticipated by this time we would have received 16,800, and instead we've only received 9461. But the last check came pretty late in the month of August, so it'll show up on your September statement. We've have interest that was paid on past due assessments by homeowners, and that's something we don't budget for, but we have received in the amount of $8,726. That's to the association. Clubhouse rentals are a little low, but anyway, so just looking at their major line items, the biggest variation is in the reserve contribution, the total. So the budget amount that we anticipated contributing to reserves from homeowner dues was $1,500,937. And we've actually contributed much more than that because of missing contributions from prior years when the flood insurance expense hit at the end of the year and that monthly contribution couldn't be made. So that has really put us on a, for the year, it looks like, we're at a negative variance. But what we've done is ensured that the reserve contribution was fully completed.
Are we running in the negative in any of these? Any of these categories? Because I know that I think the siding came in higher and estimates. Can I see that part of it? Because I was just curious whether, because I think that
maybe I need to make it a little smaller. Ugh. Okay. Well, and you won't see that showing up in this.
Where would
These are
it
just
show
the
up?
contributions. So
Something would have to be paid, right? Isn't
Right.
this
here
the-
it shows some.
yeah, and this one shows the components and it shows what's been paid. So expenses in the current month, meaning August, And then any expenses between January and July show in this column. But again, as an accounting report, this only shows what has actually been paid. And I know historically that this board has wanted a better way to track pending expenses. In other words, funds that have been committed so that they don't overcommit funds. So for example, here we do have, let me try and get over. Okay, we're looking for L23136. Okay, this particular line item is the siding repairs. And so we had allocated for the year, I think 9, but this is not the allocation. This is simply what's been accumulated towards reserves. The last column is, so, okay, so it's negative 76,000. And so this is where it's difficult for me even to articulate it, and Tara can probably do a better job. But let's look at roofs. This is a good way to look at it.
It looks like grounds is negative and.
Right.
clubhouse, all these, there's a lot. that
Right.
appears
Right. It does look that way. And so it's confusing. So what I can tell you is we know per Bob's reserve study that we need to have, what is it, $40 million or whatever to do the roofs, like some really huge amount. And what this is telling us is that right now we have accumulated $4,518 towards the roof. That is not what the reserve study says this year you will spend on roofs. That's what we've accumulated towards it. So the thing that's missing from this report is what does show in Bob Browning's report right here. What is the allocation that you're anticipating to expend in that year? So there are two
So,
different
Betsy,
numbers.
that negative 19,000, does that reflect what still needs to be collected in order to pay for roofs down the line, down in years hence? Or, oh, yeah, I'm not seeing the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just showing at the end of the year what that balance would be. Now, things like landscape are historically a year-to-year expense. So it's not you accumulate and you spend pretty much exactly the same amount. It's not like a roof where you're going to spend a little bit on roofs because, you'll have water intrusion on a few roofs or whatever. But at the end of the year, you hope that that has gone up sufficiently so that when it is time to do the roofs, you have that money. So, this is reallocated every year. So, yes, we overspent the landscape allocations for 2022. And sometimes that happens. We had a major expense with remediating trees that were removed in 2020 and removed in 2021 and never remediated. So they were remediated in 2022. And the allocation that maybe wasn't spent in those years ended up being spent in 2022. Or if it was spent in the previous years on other things, it was then spent again in 2022. So next year, when this starts again, we'll still be working from Bob's plan for us with the allocations here. And that will be moved over. It's just a really difficult report to read, which is why the reserve tracker was created. But the reserve tracker is very hard to keep accurate because, and oh God, I hope I have one available. Let me think where I might have one. Bear with me.
Well, my curiosity when we go negative is like who approves that? Is that the board decision or is it just randomly happen? Or how do we end up so negative in certain columns? Because I don't remember ever saying, oh, whoops, we overspent the reserves.
Well, it certainly did happen when you were
No,
on
well,
the
that's
board.
why I'm curious.
It happened, yeah, in landscape, and it happened, in a couple of areas, so.
So when
You-
we
I
go
mean-
negative, do we quit spending? Is that? the
Well, I
next
think
step?
you asked that question to Bob Browning too, and it's this issue of when it's something in the reserves. He said, and you could probably correct me because you probably remember what he said, that these are guidelines for expenditures. They're not firm numbers, so that if you have an overrun that's really substantial and you think it's going to affect your budget down the line, then he could rerun that analysis and see whether things needed to be readjusted for the future. But in all, the reserve budget can absorb little, the negative expenditures here and there from year to year, because over time it washes out. And plus, he redoes the reserve budget every 3 years with on-site.
Right, when he puts,
eyes on, yeah.
Actually, what he said was, to elaborate one step further,
Yeah.
was
Go ahead.
the only expense in the reserve budget that is annually spent is landscaping. So it is actually the only expense in the reserve account that you can modify and make a difference. That's what he said.
Well, he said a few other things too.
I was talking about just the landscaping.
Right. But I mean, of course, the difficulty is you can't just cut landscaping. I mean, you might not think that somebody's tree remediation down the road is very important, but they might think it's super important. So, the landscape, the grounds committee goes through and they actually have a procedure for deciding what are high priority items that need to be fixed right away and what things we can kind of wait on if we're starting to run a little bit of a deficit, and so that they inform the board, and you yourself probably voted on these things all the time. So, you can probably explain better than I can that, you receive that information and you approve certain expenditures, certain proposals, and you consider the priority of those proposals in terms of, safety and importance for protecting the landscape, irrigation things and so
and
forth.
property values.
And property
values.
values. Yeah.
The one thing I don't know, and I'm curious about, even though I was on the board, was, is the landscape committee fully informed that they've overspent and do they keep spending? Where's the money? Where does
But they
that
don't
connect?
spend the money.
No, they don't.
spend, The board
The
spends.
board spends
But
it.
but
finance-
they continue to recommend even
of
though the money's
course.
overspent?
Yes,
They
because their job
continue
is to identify deficiencies in the landscape and to make the board aware of it. If the board doesn't know that the deficiencies exist, how can they create allocations or budgets to address those deficiencies?
Well, I seem to think that there's a communication deficit when we run that much over.
Well, sometimes you just run over, how it is, and, just kind of thinking about your own backyard. I mean, some years you have to kind of redo a lot of things. I think the same thing is true on steroids in our community. But yeah, it's not the Land Grounds Committee's decision. It's fully the board's decision. They see, all the information we do. We can point out some things if we think, oh, this is sort of hidden. Maybe, we ought to do this to make it clear to the board that, there are maybe expenses coming up here that are going to be hard to handle or something like that. But, it is their decision. Betsy, speaking of the reserve tracker, what's the status of our favorite tool for capturing the
my least favorite tool.
I know, but we give you some grace for that, and you know, you just
Yeah.
kind of keep us apprised of,
Yeah.
well, you know, what the pitfalls are, but
Yeah.
I don't know, speaking for myself, I like it.
Yeah, it is a challenge because we did ask Jim Donovan to add this pending expense, which is intended to capture board commitments to projects before they've been actually invoiced. And so that is proving to be a little bit of a challenge here on the spreadsheet to get an accurate number. For example, this landscape plantings line down here, okay, you can see that what has been expensed for the year is $432,265. And then we have under the pending column, $82,470. So you do have a negative variance there of what's been spent compared to the allocation of $94,137 just on landscape plantings. But it doesn't read correctly over here in the yellow section because that
Are you showing
new-
something on the screen? Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
Betsy,
still,
you're not displaying the document.
I'm seeing the draft reserve study.
Oh dear. All right. I'm so
Good check.
sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there, now you see this this landscape planting where my cursor is moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's been expensed, that 432,265. This is what's been committed at like the last board meeting or two. Maybe actually this is not 100% up to date. I have not even had an opportunity this month to update it with whatever the board approved in earlier this month. But the point I'm making is over here in the yellow section, again, where you start with the allocation per the reserve study that we were looking at earlier, and you minus the year-to-date expenses, this number is not, it's not, what I want to say, is not showing correctly. So that's something I guess I have to go back to Jim Donovan again and work on. And this is why I don't like this tracker. I am not an accountant. We have the First Service accounting team. Their job is to use the tools that pay the bills and report back to the board of directors what has been spent. And I feel like I'm in this limbo area where I'm trying to not only keep track of what has been committed, but what's been expensed from what's been committed, and give this to the board so they can make decisions. And I don't know that this is really the best way to do that. It is complex because we have a lot of reserve components. Other communities, they might only have like their vehicle gates. And so it's very easy for the board to keep track of what they're spending on those vehicle gates. It's a little harder in this community. So.
Well, okay, so work in progress, but it still tells us, you know, it's still a nice snapshot, and some things we can just, we'll just kind of note to
Right.
self.
And it's important for the folks here to know that the board does see this every month. This is a report that I give to the board every month. And they also receive your minutes, which also alerts them to, you know, things that you feel are relevant for them to be aware of as they make decisions.
Yeah, good point, Betsy. All right. Well, I'm just mindful of the fact that we're now at 6 o'clock, which is longer than we usually go, but we did have a big power packed agenda. And so I think we've hit the end of it, correct? Can we just check in on whether next meeting, which is it the 24th of September, is the October? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that good for everybody?
Oh, yeah, we will be. Never mind, we won't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. All right, we'll go with that. Any other comments? If not,
Wait, before I'm willing to stay. I think all these people came, and if they have comments or concerns, we are recording the meeting. I'm more than happy to sit here and take their comments and listen to their concerns. They all came and we haven't given them an opportunity to speak.
thoughts, committee members? We've talked about a lot of things. I feel like I've got,
Why don't we just ask if anybody has any comments? We could go that far. Maybe nobody
Okay.
does and we're done.
okay, Mary.
I think Mr. Dyer has a question, but can you come to the microphone, please?
I'll bring this one over. Here you go.
Well, I have an incredibly simple or difficult question. I've always thought of the reserve fund for almost 50 years as a rainy day fund. It's clearly not that. It's for, and it's how many million? 12 million?
Right now, 11.5 million.
It's $11 million sitting there. And if something has not been budgeted, I gather we just go to this $11 million fund and take it. So my question is my understanding correct?
No,
That's all.
No,
the answer is no.
Well, I understand the part about setting money aside for roofs and things like that, but
That's exactly what it is. It's a pre-funding for projected expenses. Which is required by statute.
Okay. Bonnie, do you want to come and use the microphone?
I have a question. This is Carol Duke. So I haven't noticed in the minutes that it's been pointed out at all, the somewhat significant negative balance if you capture the three major line items in the reserve tracker for landscaping. And it seems like if the committee wanted to point out anything through their minutes to the board, that would certainly be something because it's one of our largest ongoing expenses. And as was mentioned earlier, it's an annual monthly thing. And yes, we did have some tree work done that was above and beyond, but we also had some work back in the May, June, July timeframe that was much more than typical. And that took us over. By the end of July, we were over budget in the red on those items. And so it just seems like maybe there could have been a little more conversation. And I know that I get told often that we take from one reserve line item and put it in another to cover shortages and things like that. I think that's a dangerous thing to continue doing over the years because we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So it just seems like a couple things. I don't think it's getting much visibility, and it certainly isn't getting much visibility to homeowners who have a big part in asking questions and making comments on what they suggest that the board or the committee might do. And so I just think it's an important point, and it's one of our largest ones aside from roofing and siding and painting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Jacobson. I would like to know what the mechanism is for questions about expenses that we have. When my expenses go up, my first thought is, okay, where do I need to cut back? So I want to second what Mary said about how I would really like to hear where and if there's any place that we can cut back. And there are ideas that I have about expenses that I don't think are necessary. but I don't know who I should voice those to and who might make a decision. So for example, when I discovered that we have a janitorial staff that deep cleans in here 4 times a week, I thought that was pretty excessive. Maybe once a week I thought would be fine. So who and how would I go about voicing some of my concerns for expenditures?
Well, generally it would be a letter to the board of directors, and then it would be in the open board packet. Also, just so you know, the president sets the agenda. So if the correspondence is received in advance, the president can review it and decide to make it an agenda item or just homeowner correspondence for review. So that's usually the best way. And the best way to send that is to nepenthe.hoa@fsresidential.com and just direct it to the board of directors. Yeah. Are there any homeowners online that would like to ask questions or make comments?
I do.
Okay,
you hear me?
Margaret? Yes, we can
Yeah,
hear you.
This has to do with the flood insurance. Back to what you guys were talking about, we can as individuals do better. I got a letter from the insurance company that said that. It says, congratulations, we have great news. You've been determined that you are eligible for a lower flood insurance. So we need to make sure that the board understands that maybe going to an individual is a much better route. That's number one. Back to your reserve billing and etc. Mixing it up with your operating account is what's confusing everybody. You should have an operating account for your reserve fund. And when you take money out of your reserve fund, so people can say, oh, look, they pulled out $40,000 and it's going towards landscaping. Then you can individually put what you used it for and all the costs. And then they know what was actually done for the money that you were spending. Mixing it up between the two operating is what's confusing everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I think that's it.
Well, I really appreciate everybody's comments. As a good idea, Mary. It's nice to hear what people's concerns are. And we will, I think hopefully the board will take these kinds of things into consideration. It seems like, well, Tara's not on the call anymore. She had to drop off, but it seems like there are some things that we could talk about a little bit more, just in terms of homeowner education about how the reserves work and so forth. But sure appreciate everybody being here. I know I missed some people, Betsy, so hopefully you've got the people that kind of came in late, and I'll get those folks on my list too.
Yes.
Well, great. Thanks again. And I guess I'll call this meeting adjourned at 6:11 p.m.
All right, we'll see you next month. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye, Marty. She's the